All right, welcome back again. Continuing on from where we left off. Last time we updated our project to a multi-module project and still able to build it and everything. So now that we've talked about plugins and modules, let's talk about dependencies. So Maven is all about managing dependencies, and you can think of dependencies as basically external code in the form of Java, jar files, library files that we can pull down and include in our source code. So one thing that we're going to do for our server, instead of running a separate server and building a WAR file that we can deploy to, we're actually going to bundle Jetty, the web server, the Java application server, into our server project here and run it in embedded mode, which allows us to configure it all programmatically. We don't have to mess with server configurations to get Jetty up and running. We can configure it programmatically and manage everything from within our code base. That way we get, there's pros and cons of doing it each way. Like if you have a DevOps team, then potentially your DevOps team would want to do all the configuration, and then you can just give them a WAR to deploy. But since we're building everything, we'll go ahead and bundle all that Jetty configuration stuff into our application. So if I bring that web browser over here, I can look. Let's go back into Maven repository. We'll search for Jetty, and we can see org eclipse Jetty, Jetty server is inside here. And if I just search for Jetty, or not with HTTP2 on there. Yeah, so Eclipse Jetty project. If I just scroll down a little bit through here, I see that there are Jetty versions that are version specific for Java, and it depends on, well, I should say the licenses and the version information, like the servlet stuff, ties into what version of Java that you use. I believe that these Jetty versions are almost identical in terms of the APIs that they use. They just happen to be built specifically for specific Java versions and specific servlet versions. So since I'm using Java version 17, I need to use, or I should use, Jetty version 11. If you're using older versions of Java, then you can pick an appropriate Jetty version for whatever version of Java you're using. But pretty much it's going to be pretty much the same. So I went to Maven repository and looked for Jetty. I see Jetty server in here, and I can see the different versions. So if you're using Java version 8, then you could get this 9.4.44. Since I'm using the latest Java, I'll go ahead and get the latest version 11 of Jetty as well, which I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of, it's almost identical in terms of the code that I'm going to be typing in, what you would type in if you're using 9.4.44 compared to what I'm using in 11. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, move this browser out of the way, come back over here to IntelliJ, and I'm looking at the top level POM. I'll go ahead and include these other files for now. So I'm looking at the very top level POM in the project. It's got our modules defined in it. And what I'm going to do is create a dependency management section, and then insert in there create dependencies, and then paste in that Jetty dependency. Now, in a similar way to how we did plugin management, we're going to do dependency management. So basically, inside dependency management, we're going to configure what dependencies we're going to use, including the versions, and then whenever we define that dependency, we can leave off the configuration of it and pull the configuration from the dependency management section, if that makes sense. So we've defined Jetty server here with a version. So what I'm going to do is copy paste this dependency block up to our server POM, tutorial API server POM. And I'll go ahead and split this down so we can see both. And I'm going to create a dependencies section and then paste in our dependency. And since I have a version up here in dependency management, I don't need a version down here in dependencies. In fact, I'll say that the only two versions you should ever see in child POMs are your model version and your parent version. So any dependency versions, any plugin versions, all those other versions should be defined in your top level POM. Now, we have this properties section as well. Something that I sometimes see is projects that create properties for their versions. So for example, they would have like jetty.version up here, and then down here they would say jetty.version. So this would build just the same as having the version hard-coded down here in this dependency configuration. I don't feel strongly about which approach you use. I very slightly prefer not doing it this way and just having my versions down here in the dependencies. Let me type this in before I forget it. And just having my basically dependency configuration information in one place. That won't pollute all my properties. When we get hundreds of dependencies, I don't really like having hundreds of properties tracking the versions of everything at the top, in this properties section. I prefer having it inside the dependency section itself. Now, I suspect what we're going to end up with is, in some cases, like Jetty, Jetty's a good example, we're going to have multiple dependencies related to Jetty, all with the same version. Like I think there's a Jetty HTTP, and I think there's a Jetty util. So in this case, where we have 3 dependencies all with Jetty, what we need to make sure about is that we keep the versions the same. So specifying a property, a single property that says jetty.version makes that easier. But in general, it's not too difficult just to make sure that, like, if I'm going to update a Jetty version, then I should make sure that I'm updating all the Jetty versions to the same one. Some projects, I don't think Jetty is like this. There is a Jetty BOM. So a BOM, I forget what BOM stands for. A BOM allows you to bring in one import or one dependency and use it as an include to get all of your Jetty dependencies. So this solves that version problem that I was just talking about keeping all your Jetty versions the same. I didn't realize Jetty had a BOM, so I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that and just get rid of these other dependencies and just use the BOM dependency. I think I can, I was going to say, I think I can command click on this and actually open it up, but I guess I can't. But I probably can from over here. Files, view all, Jetty BOM, POM. So yeah, we've got the version up here, license, developer stuff, mailing list stuff. Right? We could put all this stuff in our POM as well, but we're not going to do that, at least for now. Okay, and then inside dependency management, which I think did I just close it? Inside dependency management, we've got all the different dependency configurations that we can manually include in our POM, or we just by including the BOM, we get all these for free. I forget what BOM stands for. Let me just look that up real quick. Bill of materials. So basically, that doesn't really add any additional valuable information. Basically, it just says if you need a Jetty version like we do in our server, then we can get all of our Jetty versions from the same place and make sure that they're all configured with the same versions just by using a bill of materials, a BOM. So now that I've specified this dependency, let me go ahead and do a build and make sure everything is working okay. I think I need, okay, so it didn't pick it up. I believe I need to do a scope include. in here. Let me see if that makes a difference. That did not make a difference. What are these errors exactly? Must be, oh, provided, oh, import. I said include, but I meant import. Which is, this error message is pretty clear. It's saying the scope, right, that's what this is, dependency management, dependency scope, which kind of drills down into this scope field for this very specific dependency, which is this Jetty bomb, must be one of, and then it gives this list. I had include in there, but I should have had import in there. So just explaining kind of what this error message is saying. This one says the same thing. I'm not sure why it shows up kind of multiple times, but now that I fixed it to import, let's do a Maven clean install and see what happens. Okay, so we see it do a download. If I scroll back up a little bit. So it recognizes that we've specified a bomb as a dependency, and it went ahead and pulled it down. That's from this dependency management section. And then as I scroll down in the tutorial API server section, we can see it pulling down a few different dependencies, SLF4J things, which we'll add as well. SLF4J stands for Simple Logging Framework for Java, and we're going to use it for logging as well. In fact, we'll probably do that next. So yeah, by adding this as a dependency, we see it downloaded some transitive dependencies that Jetty needs and that we're going to need as well. Now, one thing to notice is that I added a dependency here, and I didn't add any code that uses that dependency. So basically what that means is my project here, you can think of as being polluted. Like I've added dependencies that I'm not using, which is typically a bad state that you want to avoid, right? We don't want dependencies in our projects that we're now bundling in, you know, with our whole project once we're building it, and we're not even using those. So what we want to do is configure our plugins to be a little bit more strict about that. And what I want is I want our plugins to tell us when we're using a dependency, or when we've defined a dependency that we're not using, and I want it to tell us when we are using a dependency that we haven't defined. For example, like if we're using SLF4J and we didn't define it in our list of dependencies in our server, we would still be able to use it because we're getting it for free as a transitive dependency from Jetty. So what I want is our plugins to warn us about those situations so that we can fix them. Because right now Maven's a little bit too lenient for my use case, and for an enterprise use case where we really want strict control of what dependencies we're using. We might want to manage the licenses associated with them, make sure we're not using any licensed code that we can't support, for our company or whatever. So the way to do that is we can use the Maven dependency plugin. So I still have the compiler plugin open. Let me get rid of this and then switch compiler to dependency. The dependency plugin has a large list of supported goals, which you can see that giant list here. What we want is basically either analyze or analyze only. So analyzes the dependency of this project and determines which are used and declared, unused and undeclared, or unused and declared. That's kind of confusing. But basically it does what we were saying, where we don't want to define things that we're not using, and if we use something, we want to make sure that we have it defined and configured right with the right version and everything. So dependency analyze does that. Analyze only is the same, but it's meant to be bound in a POM. It doesn't fork and execute like compiles and test compiles and things like that. So we'll start out with analyze only. That's the one I typically use. Let me actually click on it so we can see what information we have here. So it doesn't really provide any additional information, but I'll leave it right here so we can at least partly see it. Now, when I added these plugins, I just added them in the list that they were printed out in the Maven build process. Usually what I like to do with dependencies and plugins is to sort them alphabetically. It's not that big a deal, so I'm not going to do that right yet. I'm not going to take the time to sort them like in this video, but I might sort them offline before the next video if I think about it. In the meantime, I'm just going to pick a spot and stick the dependency plugin here in the middle. Let's go find out what the version is. So in this case, it looks like 3.2.0. I suspect that's the latest, but I can just check real quick. Yeah, 3.2.0. Let's add some configuration in here. Let's go back and look at what our configuration options are. I guess we don't need these anymore. So analyzer. Okay, so what I want is fail on warning. Now I just tabbed over a bunch of space, a bunch to get over here. Something I'll comment on real quick since I just thought of it. I'm using spaces for everything, and that's pretty much an industry standard. Like when I'm doing code reviews, when thinking about hiring somebody, I'm okay with seeing tabs as long as it's either all tabs or all spaces. What I don't want is to see a mixture of them. So configure your development environment to either always use spaces or always use tabs. My preference, and I think most preferences across the industry, are spaces. So just as an FYI, I guess. Anyway, fail on warning. There are some default in here about ignoring things. We'll probably end up adding some ignores at some point in the future. I am going to go ahead and turn on verbose as well. I do like seeing the output when I do a Maven clean install. In fact, let me go ahead and do one and see if I get any additional output. So I added it to plugin management, but I didn't add it anywhere else. So because I didn't add it anywhere else, I don't actually see it being used anywhere. So let me scroll down here. And add it in there. Excuse me. Okay, do I see it? No. So the reason I don't see it is because I didn't define any executions for it. So I configured the plugin, but by default, the dependency plugin isn't one that has executions by default, which makes sense, right? We haven't been seeing it run. So let me go ahead and add an execution. It's going to look pretty similar to this other execution that I created, kind of like this. So in fact, I'm going to go ahead and just copy these lines and paste them in here. So in this case, I'll give it an ID. This ID doesn't really matter that much. It just has to be unique for each execution. So I'm going to say analyze. I guess I'll just call it only, because that's what we're going to do for our goal as well. And then the phase. I'm not sure. Did I not spell that right? There is no I in there. I don't actually want to run it in the test. Where'd my browser go? By default it binds to the verify phase. I'll go ahead and keep it at the verify phase. All right, so now let me bring this terminal window back up, kind of shuffling between these windows a little bit. All right, I see the dependency plugin running now. Okay, good. So I see it running for the top level module, which we don't have any dependencies defined in our top level module. We only have dependency management defined at the top level, which makes sense, right? Because we don't have any code up here. This is a POM project with submodules, so there's no dependencies to manage at or there's no dependencies to include at the top level because we don't have code at the top level. The next one is the REST module. Same thing here. It's the dependency plugin did run, but it said no dependency problems found because we haven't defined any dependencies, so there's nothing to complain about yet. And then for tutorial API server, it ran as well, and it complained with a warning, and we have warning set to fail, which caused the failure, and it's saying unused declared dependency. So we've declared this dependency Jetty server. Let me open it up. Yeah, so we've declared this dependency Jetty server. It automatically recognized the version from our top level BOM, which includes Jetty server inside it. So, and it's compile scope, which means it's part of the compile process. But we don't have any, like we're not using any classes from this library at all. So that's what this warning is about. It's saying you've included a dependency that has no classes in it that are being used. So you should either actually use this dependency or delete the dependency, whichever makes sense. In our case, we're going to go ahead and use it. But about out of time for this one. We'll pick up next time with starting our Jetty server and probably adding logging as well, just to get some stuff up and running. All right, and that's it for this one. Thank you.